going on, Bulls fans? Welcome to another episode of Chicago Bulls Central, your number one spot for everything Chicago Bulls related. And as promised, I'm back with the second out of 3 episodes today, 2 mailbags, 1 regular daily episode. And we're going to break down the takeaways from the Bulls preseason so far and what that may mean for the rotation, what that may mean for the team, who's going to step up, who's poised to have a big season, and are we in line maybe for some postseason awards from certain players with their play? We'll talk about all that and more in today's Overreacting to Preseason video, right after this.
You are now tuned in to Chicago Bulls Central, your number one place for all Chicago Bulls news and content.
All right, Bulls fans. So at the end of this video, I'm going to let you guys know, I'm going to talk a little bit about the Draymond Green situation with Jordan Poole and things like that and give my thoughts on it because I've been gone and I haven't gotten to talk general NBA things. But with that being said, let's go ahead and get into the daily episode today. And so taking a look at the Bulls' 3 preseason games so far, right? And some of this that I did have to kind of look at, I had to calculate some things because they don't make like preseason numbers like easily accessible from a totality point. You can go to each game and get the numbers, but just looking at percentages and things like that. So while I have been under the impression that Vooch hasn't, for one, shot the ball too well from 3-point range, he is 6 for 13 from 3-point range so far in preseason. So he's shooting the 3 ball actually at a really high clip and percentage, adding that to his down low game, adding that to everything else. Like Vooch is not only in line for a big extension from the Chicago Bulls, he's earning that. And if this play continues to go into the season, don't be surprised if Vooch not only signs, I still don't think it's going to be an extremely long contract. I think at the most it's probably going to be 3 years, probably a 2+1, something like that. But he's going to be in line for considerable money, and he's earned that. And that makes you feel good. Now, he does need to keep that play up in the regular season, and that's one of the things that we do want to talk about is how much of what we've seen from the Bulls so far may be fool's gold, how much of it is going to be things that you can actually build upon, because I do think a lot of this is, when you look at how they're going about it, is going to be consistent from the season as long as the team and the coaching staff keep going to what's working, and Vooch is one of that. I don't think this play that we're seeing from Vooch is fool's gold at all. I think it's more in line with what we saw from Vooch down in Orlando, and now he's bringing that. He's adapted his game up. I've been saying over the course of the summer, once the Chicago Bulls were betting on continuity, the one singular player, if we were going to put it on one player that needed to benefit the most from continuity, from settling into his role, from the coaching staff realizing they did not use him or put him in the best situations in some games last season, and him admitting he was settling, was Nikola Vucevic. And we're now seeing that come to fruition, and seeing his play has been just great. He's been one of the most consistent Bulls outside of Demar Derozan, and he's been great in that role. Now, we got to talk about some of the negative as well. Like, if we're talking about fool's gold and what's bigger concerns or what's just preseason, is the play of Zach Levine. The play of Zach Levine has been concerning. Some of the more, I would say, knee-jerk reaction-y Bulls fans that just, they want everything now, right? And, you have the Bulls fans that just, they see everything as an issue and they overreact to it. And I think that's some of that with Zach Levine. Yes, Zach Levine is working himself back in the rhythm. Yes, Zach Levine did have knee surgery this offseason. But the one thing that we've known about Zach Levine, to think that this is going to be the Zach Levine that you're going to get, to think that Zach Levine is going to regress that much, I think it is just fans being worried needlessly. And don't get me wrong, if this does continue into the season, all right, yeah, let's revamp and let's have this conversation. And while I do understand, hey, at the end of the day, you have to evaluate the performance that you're given. And if we're being fair in the evaluation of Zach Levine's performance that we've been given, it is some cause for concern there. There's been some, of him picking his spots. There's been some of maybe him passing in certain times where people want to see him score. There's been him not shooting the ball overall very effectively in a few games. But overall, I tend, and I said this on the live yesterday, to believe that we're going to get the real Zach Levine back. And I understand for some fans, it's like, okay, we need to see you go hard every single game. And it's just not like that. Everybody doesn't treat the preseason the same. Zach Levine hasn't played a ton of minutes in preseason either. But with that being said, I'm not concerned about the thing about Zach Levine. If I do think that this is a bit of a thing that as soon as the season starts, a lot of these concerns are going to go away, in my opinion. Now, could that prove me wrong? Absolutely, there is a chance for that. But I'm not really too concerned with the up and down play or the downplay of Zach Levine so far in preseason, because I do think Zach knows when to turn it on. He's going to he's looked great when he has picked his spots at times, and so I'm not as concerned about the Zach Levine thing, but I do understand the fans' concern there. All right, that was a negative, right? The Zach Levine's play has not been great, but again, I'm not too worried about it. Looking at it as something that maybe need to be a concern going into the regular season, I'm not concerned about it until I am. That's my thoughts on it. Now, another thing that's been a huge positive is the play of Javonte Green. Javonte, it just seems like he's just playing with a level of confidence and a level in he knows what he can go out there and do. He knows his role. And I said earlier that Nikola Vucevic was the player that can benefit the most off continuity. You know who's benefiting off that? It's Javonte. He has adapted his game in many ways to be everything that the Bulls specifically need him to be. He knows when he's out there on the court, when he needs to cut, when he needs to be more out on the perimeter. And just seeing Javonte in the way that he goes he's gone about his game has been delivering. Like it's been purposeful. Like he's gone about his game in a way that it's to fit the team. It's to fit whatever matchup he's out there against. Like he's not out there just being out on the perimeter like sometimes he was last season. He's not just out there cutting. He's out there being all over the floor. To quote a great and Stacey King, there's 5 Javonte Greens out there. But it really does feel like that. Javonte, when we need him to shoot, he's shooting. When we need him to cut, he's cutting. When we need him to play great defense, he's playing defense. When we need him just to be the energy guy and come in and force some turnovers, play some, Javonte has been all of that. And so he's very much so benefiting off the continuity of this team, but we heard that he was working on shot this summer, but it seems like it's been more than that. He's settled now. He knows what this team needs of him. He knows what the coaching staff needs of him, and he knows what it seems like the faults of the other players that he's out there with, and he can better fill in those gaps. Javonte could be in line for a 6th Man of the Year award. And I'm not just saying that as hyperbole. I truly do think when you look at the way that Javonte's been able to produce in the minutes that he's been able to produce, and not just starting, we mean like if Javonte's only given 16 minutes, he finds a way to be highly productive in those 16 minutes. He's been one of the most consistent Bulls. Really, if we're talking about consistency, it's been DeMar, Vooch, and Javonte Green. They've been the most consistent Bulls in preseason, in my opinion. And Javonte, who's also up for a contract at the end of this season, and in the contract year, is probably going to get paid. Now, I will say this, right? One of the things that concerns me with this is that, and again, this is Bulls fandom PTSD. I'm not comparing the players, right? But I'm comparing kind of similar situations that happened. Do you remember when we initially got John Salmons? You remember John Salmons averaged like 18 or 20 points per game that stretch when we first got him, and he looked great. And then we signed him to a more long-term contract, and then he kind of fell off. Then we ended up trading him. I believe we signed him to, or did we trade him before? Can't remember. But is that a little bit of that? Like, I think Javonte is a much better player, but I'm not going to lie and say there isn't some concern of, okay, this is a contract year from a player that's 29 years old. Could there be some fall off? Could there be? Or could this just be him being very motivated? There is a little bit of concern with that with me. But either way, if it comes down to it and you got to sign him or not, I'm signing Javonte Green every day, because even if the scoring production falls off, he's still going to be somebody who hustles. He's still going to be a dog. He's still going to be all those things. Javonte's filling many roles for the Chicago Bulls that we need. And in the talk about 6th Man of the Year, another thing that's been positive so far in the Chicago Bulls preseason is Andre Drummond. First game, not so much. He's come along the second games. He hit 3 3-pointers last night, which is crazy. But Andre Drummond is shaping up to be everything that we need and wanted him to be. Has the scoring been as consistent? It hasn't been. It's kind of been more up and down. But with that being said, Andre Drummond and what he's been able to provide to us is exactly what we need. And I'm very high on his fit on this team. And as we move forward, it's going to be something that I continue to watch. But I do think that Andre Drummond, with what he's able to produce in the rate that he's able to produce it in, the minutes he's able to produce it in, and if that 3-point shot, not necessarily saying I'm going to all of a sudden expect Andre Drummond to turn into this player that's taking 1 or 2 threes per game, but if it turns into a weapon that Drummond can use, is that if teams leave him open out there, he can take it and hit it at a decent clip, right? I'm not expecting, I'm not like, if Andre Drummond takes 23s this season and hits that at a 30% clip, that is a weapon for the Chicago Bulls team, and one that is an unexpected piece to a player's game that I was still expecting to be pretty good for him. I didn't even factor that in being a possibility that he can give that type of production. So we'll see what happens with Andre Drummond. But he's a player that's definitely stood out to me so far as well in preseason, and just his play and his fit. Again, first game got kind of out of whack there, but then him and Goran Dragic in the second game worked out a nice bit of chemistry. And then in the third game, we've seen Andre Drummond put up his best game so far. All right. Back to one of the negatives, or I would say more so a concern, more so than a straight negative, is the play of Coby White. Against Denver, he looked great. 5 for 7, 2 for 4 from three-point range, 15 points. In the game last night, while the shooting did not fall for him, he still was able to do a lot of other things. His passing came along. He played a pretty good and decent game, I will say. I'm not going to call it great. It was a decent game amongst other things, but that's what we saw from Coby White. And I would say this, like a Coby White that finds a way to be productive or finds a way to give the Bulls something when his shot isn't falling, it still can be a productive piece of this team. Now, the defense is still going to be some concerns, as it always is with Coby White. But I'll tell you what, if Coby White is motivated by the play of one Dalen Terry, which we're going to talk about next, it could push him to have a better season overall. But again, I like to see the fact that Coby has been finding ways to be productive, even if his shot isn't falling, which is something that I got on him a lot about last season. Another very consistent part, and I don't want to overlook it, is Demar Derozan. I don't have a lot to say, right? Because DeMar just goes about his game in the way that we expect, and we've come to expect for DeMar DeRozan, and the way that he just goes about his business. DeMar has been the most consistent player on the Chicago Bulls team. I think he scored 20 points in almost every game or close to it in all 3 preseason games so far. And in that time, he's gone about his work effortlessly. And that's what you want to see from DeMar DeRozan. That's what you want to see from a player of his kind, like just to come in and do his work. And again, to talk about Zach Levine, one of the reasons that Bulls fans are concerned is because while Zach seems like he's just going through the motions in preseason, DeMar's been locked in since the preseason started, and he just keeps playing basketball. That's what DeMar DeRozan does. So I wanted to talk about him as well. I didn't want to go overlooking how consistent he's been, but we got to talk about this next player, and that's Ayo Dosunmu. Ayo Dosunmu he's earned that starting point guard position. I talked about it in the mailbag episode that dropped earlier today. Ayo Dosunmu has played. Again, I think him and Alex Caruso have both played really good. Gordon has been kind of up and down in the 2 games. He didn't play last night. But I think that Ayo Dosunmu has now shown at least enough for me to say, no, Ayo Dosunmu needs to be our starting point guard, especially when you look at the defense. Now, does he need to work on his court vision some? Yes, I think he needs to do that. I would like to see the assist-to-turnover ratio get better than what it has been for Ayo Dosunmu as well. We'll see how much they're going to actually use Ayo Dosunmu to actually, set up offense and things like that. But I like Ayo Dosunmu. I think he's earned that starting point guard role. Absolutely. He's definitely been a plus for the Chicago Bulls. And now let's talk about a player that I have not gotten a chance to talk a lot about, right? I didn't get to do a video because I was out of town at the time he was moved to the bench, and that's Patrick Williams. Patrick Williams has not left a lot to be desired. Am I off the Patrick Williams train? No. Do I think that for some Bulls fans, like, oh, he's a bust? No, I don't think that. Like, again, I'm not one of the people who are like, oh, because you're the 4th overall pick, you need to do all this, and this. But I do want to see Patrick Williams be consistent. I do want to see him take his spots, right? And take them confidently, not pass up on so many shots as he's done before in his NBA career. I want to see him utilized a little bit better in half court as well, but he has to earn that with his play. The play of Patrick Williams, the fact that it's been so up and down, him being demoted, if in the weeks of practice, or the week of practice between now, or the couple of days of practice between now and the game against Milwaukee, considering Giannis is coming, well, if Giannis ends up playing, I need to see Patrick Williams play with a chip on his shoulder. Like, it's one thing to have all the potential talent in the world. It's another for it to just seem like you don't believe in it, right? That you don't believe in it. I need to see Patrick Williams wake up. Like, that's really all that it is that Patrick Williams needs to go out there and realize, hey, physically, I'm about to compete. We'll see what the shot's falling or not, but physically, I'm about to make you feel my presence. That's what I want to see from Patrick Williams, and we have not seen that. I'm still a Patrick Williams believer. I know Patrick Williams being demoted to the bench, it gave a lot of his detractors fuel and ammunition, and rightfully so. But I need to see Patrick Williams wake up. I need to see Patrick Williams get his shit in gear and take this demotion and realize this needs to be a wake-up call for me. Let me come out and go about my business in a way. Let me play so good and hit the shots that I get naturally in the flow of the offense that they have to start calling more plays for me. And yes, in the preseason, I talked very much so about how Billy Donovan needs to create more for Patrick Williams and utilize him. As a 4th overall pick, only averaging 7 shots per game, it's a combination of both Patrick Williams and the coaching staff that has got him to those averages. But both need to work together, but he needs to step up. That's what needs to happen. Patrick Williams needs to step up. Getting the start, or Javonte getting the start over you, Derrick Jones Jr. getting the start over you, who fell out of the rotation at the end of last season for reasons. We need to see Patrick Williams step up. That's what I want to see. And then, we'll see what happens with that. So that is definitely a concern so far. How he responds to this, that concern could go away or it could become stronger. And we'll see what happens with that. Next one up that I want to talk about, Marko Simonovich. For a team that needs size, for a team that doesn't have a lot of true power forwards on the roster, and Marko could be a power forward, he could be a center, but to have a 6'11", 225-pound guy who offensively can pass, shoot, put the ball on the floor, has a solid post game, but cannot get in the game. What is Marko Simonovich not showing in practice to where Billy Donovan is not using him at all? Billy Donovan doesn't know Marko Simonovich exists. Now, he did get in the second game for 6 minutes in garbage time, but listen, it's an issue, and it is definitely a concern. Now, he's a second-round pick. I've been very much been of the mind that second-round picks, they can't be bust because they're second-round picks. But with that being said, Marko came into this. We know he was a second-round pick for more reasons than just basketball. It was because he was overseas. Was he going to come over? Things like that. Marko needs to step up, and the fact that he has not, the fact that he hasn't even cracked the garbage time rotation. In the first game of the season, we saw Tony Bradley get off the bench before Marko Simonovich. We saw Kostas Antetokounmpo get off the bench before Marko Simonovich. Second game, he got 6 minutes in garbage time. Third game, no time. These are concerns for a player that theoretically has the size, the shooting, and some of the scoring at least there. Defensively, huge negative. But it has some of the things that you can need. Oh, rebounding as well. But it cannot get off the bench. The coaching staff does not look towards him. That says a lot about where Marko is right now in his progression, and it's definitely a concern for this team. Definitely a concern. Alex Caruso, talk a little bit about him. He's been everything that you expect Alex Caruso to be. It's kind of hard to really evaluate Alex because it's not any one thing he stood out doing amazingly, but it's just him playing well. Goran, kind of iffy on Goran. I do see the role, and I do see Goran and his veteran leadership and being a point guard off the bench, especially when him and Drummond kind of worked out that two-man game at points in the Denver game. I like that, right? I like that. But let's end this on the rook in Dalen Terry, who has flashed every bit of the skill set that we wanted to see from Dalen Terry. Dalen Terry has been everything advertised to be earlier than what I expected him to be in. And Dalen Terry is going to force this team into a weird situation, right? Is that, do you play him and maybe not play him a lot of minutes, but you still keep him on the main roster to get those 8 minutes because he could earn more? Those 8 minutes that he gives you is so high energy, so this and that. Do you keep him on the roster for that and he not get a lot of minutes, or do you send him down to the G League where he can get 20, 25 minutes per game to really work and develop his game a little bit more? Dalen Terry is going to force this coaching staff to use him. And I, for one, like that. Like, there's something to be said of, okay, well, he's not going to get very many minutes, more than likely, on this team if he's playing NBA minutes. Okay. But what he's able to give you, what he's giving you, and hopefully in this next game against the Milwaukee Bucks, I want to see Dalen Terry get off the bench even earlier against better competition to really see what we have in him. But Dalen Terry has at least flashed a little bit of the scoring. Definitely the court vision, the passing, the defense, the energy is out of this world. Dalen Terry has, for a team that needed that dog, for a team that needed that energy guy, Dalen Terry has been all of that so far in preseason. And for me, I would hate to see that be moved to the G League when we need that off the bench. Now, if we're not going to have, Billy Donovan has gone very deep on the bench so far in preseason. If he does plan on shrinking the rotation some and get more to like a 9-man rotation, and Dalen Terry's just kind of out of that, then I do understand him going to the G League. But at this point, I think Dalen Terry's played, and it's been such a great positive, and the impact that he makes is felt, right? It's felt immediately when he gets on the court. Is he going to make rookie mistakes? Absolutely. There are going to be some games where we see Dalen make a great play, and then he makes 2 terrible plays back to back. It's going to happen. It's bound to happen. But even with that being said, there's enough in Dalen Terry's game. There's enough in the way that Dalen Terry has played that I, for one, think that Dalen Terry needs to be getting minutes for the Chicago Bulls in the regular season once it starts. But those are kind of my thoughts so far on the 3 preseason games, trying to catch up. Now, I did say I was going to end this on talking about Draymond Green and the Jordan Poole situation. I saw the video. When the things were initially coming out, I was like, hey, listen, practice gets heated even amongst teammates sometimes. One thing that we know about Draymond Green is that contract situations, like pressures on him, he deals with that in a very different way. Like, and I've now seen like the think pieces go to like how much Draymond has possibly hurt when you look at maybe forcing KD out, like things like that. How much has he actually hurt the Golden State Warriors? I think for this, right, it was said that by Kevon Looney that he has to earn the trust back of his teammates. And I think when you're looking at the younger regime of players starting to get ready to take over once Steph goes away, Clay goes away, Draymond goes away, that his antics have less and less of a leeway because at some point you have to move on for you. And we know the production has dipped a little bit for Draymond and things like that. Going into a contract year, has that caused the stress? Whatever it is, I look at it like this: like things get heated between teammates, but looking at that video, you can't excuse just going over and clocking a teammate in that way. Now, could it motivate the team? Could it be like a Steve Kerr effect where now Jordan Poole is going to be the sixth man of the year? Could be some shit like that, right? But I just look at this and saying that this is a guy who's clearly not dealing with the pressures that came into the season very well, that does not excuse it at all. And this Warriors team is still locked and loaded. They're still going to be probably the favorites out west, all those type of things. But in a contract year, and I don't want to hear nothing about what can the Bulls give up for Draymond. I'm not trying to hear none of that shit. But it really just boils down to Draymond has to get his shit in gear. And I look at this and I'm just like, wow, that is not what a defending champion wants to come into the season dealing with that type of bullshit. But let me know your thoughts on that. Let me know your thoughts on everything down below. Make sure you're following the show at Bull Central Pod. You can send us any feedback, questions, comments, concerns, bullcentralpod@gmail.com. Lastly, if you want to leave a text and or voicemail, the number to do so, 773-270-2799. We're the number one spot for everything Chicago Bulls related because of you guys. And like I like to end every episode on, go Bulls. Love you guys. Peace, y'all.
This has been a presentation of the Break Media.